Hi, welcome to my little orientation to the XYZ homework entering system. I have compiled a couple things that I think will make this a little more accessible and easy to use. However, it is not going to cover every little thing that can happen. If you have questions throughout the course, please make sure to message me. One of the things you're going to have access to is this answer entry guide. And so I just want to show you that. So when you are in the Quill Editor, it's called Math Quill Editor, and the way you access it is in the entry box for your XYZ homework. You will see, when you click in it, a yellow up arrow, which will open up the Quill Editor. Sometimes only the basic tab is there. Other times there will be more tabs available for other functions. I don't think they show it here, but I will show you that. So you have the basic ones are fractions, exponents, roots, nth roots, absolute value, having parentheses. We won't use this much in this class, but pi, infinity, DNE, which stands for does not exist, which we use when things don't exist. The preview button, when you put in an answer, after you hit save, it'll convert it to the typed out version, and then if you look to the right at the preview, it'll put it back in that nice math type format, and it will tell you if the syntax is okay or not. That doesn't mean the answer is correct, it just means that it understands what you're trying to say. For example, you can see here this square root was by using SQRT and then in parentheses what you're taking the square root of. I have the list here of some of the things. So if you wanted to use the keyboard and type it in, you'll have some of those functions like square root, how to do it with an example. I did have a student who, I will show you what they did, used this square root symbol on their calculator, and it did not understand it. You can see it says undefined. It didn't understand how to interpret that. So sometimes it'll say invalid notation, other times it'll say that it's undefined, something along those lines. So here is the nice way of doing it so that it looks like you're used to, but down here is to enter it with a keyboard if that's just your preference. Some of the main ones that you'll probably just use the keyboard for are obviously the parentheses, and you may even use the exponent and DNE. Just type in DNE and infinity. And infinity is just two not zeros, but the O, the letter O makes infinity. So let's, the caret, it makes an exponent. So let's look at some problems. Go back to, there's just some random problems that I've picked for us to look at. So you'll be doing this from Canvas, not from their website, and that's important to note. Don't go directly from their website, otherwise the grade will not transfer. So here are some problems that we're going to go through. Okay, so it says set builder notation. So this is read X. The set says such that, let me start over. The set X such that, and we want to do X is less than or equal to -5. And so you can either type X less than equal to, that's the keyboard version for less than or equal to, -5, or you could hit the up arrow and type it X, and then you can see inequality tab less than or equal to, and then it was -5. Save. And then interval notation, which you'll learn about, is and I'll graph it first because I think it'll make it make more sense then. If x is less than or equal to -5, you are including -5. So you'd have this closed dot at -5, and do your best to go right on -5, and then less than. They'll take the arrow line segment and ray tool, and you'll click down here and continue holding until you see the arrows. Okay, one thing I've seen students do is put -5 and then, oops, I can't even do it. Put -5 and then have like this gap, or they go over it twice. If you go over it twice like that, it's going to mark it wrong because it sees the answer of this and that. Another issue I've seen students do is that they just go like, okay, I want to have 5 on, or this one isn't letting you go any past that. So they go like that. But you need to have the dot to include the -5. You can't just butt up to it. So again, -5, hold down, and then let up once you see the arrows. So interval notation, you'll learn more about this, is just a way of expressing the interval of possible answers. And so this arrow means it keeps going to -infinity, and so we don't include -infinity, so we use parentheses. And you can see right now it says invalid because, well, you haven't answered it. So -infinity, the 2O makes infinity, comma, -5. And to include the -5, you use a bracket. And so now it's all valid and it's previewing it just the way I want to see it. Again, you could have also have done the Mathquil editor and you have parentheses here, and if you go into functions, oops, not functions, intervals, you'll see your 4 different options for interval notation. We had this one a minute ago, so it was -infinity, comma, and I'm just using the arrow on my keypad, but I can also use the arrow here, -5, and then save, and it'll enter it in. When you're doing your homework, you can hit submit, and you will see green and full credit if you got it right. If you made a mistake on part of it, let's say you did that, you'll see it's marked wrong. Or if you got part of it right, sometimes you get partial credit. So let me do this with an open dot and like that. So you can see that these were correct. This was partially correct because they had from -5 on, you just didn't do the right thing. You didn't include -5, and so it gave you partial credit. And so you have a total of 0.8 on this. You can do these up to 3 times. This is unlimited because I didn't have it set to the normal settings, but normally it's 3, and then you'll have to hit try a similar question, and then you get a similar one, but slightly different numbers to try again. So you actually have an infinite number, almost an infinite number of options and opportunities to get full credit on your homework questions. The only exception is if there's a graphic, which occurs every once in a while. All right, I think that is, for the most part, what I wanted to share with you for these is just the open and closed and how to enter the answer, and this quill editor, how to get to it. Let's go on to another lesson just to see some of its things. So, oh, and this print version allows you to print it kind of in a more condensed way, which is great for you to maybe have when you're not by a computer, and then you can go ahead and enter your answers once you have access to your computer again. See, it'll say here, enter DNE if it is an empty set, if it doesn't exist. So graph the compound. If you want to go between 2 things, this is not necessarily the answer, but just to model the situation. Again, this shouldn't have any gap. It should be straight through it. If you make a mistake, clear and redo it. sometimes when there's fractions, they will pre-make your tick marks. So let's just say your answer was 2 1/3. Go one of the 1, 2, 3 spaces here, 2 1/3. Let's say it was going all the way to 4, and it was including 4. Again, that's not necessarily the answer. If you type something in, the preview should show up on the right-hand side. This is nice when if you wanted the 2 + 3 to be in the denominator, you can see, oh, I didn't have that. I want 2 + 3 like that. And you can adjust it, or you can use the up arrow that shows up when you are not in the print view. Also, please do not enter answers in the print view because it will not record them. There is no submit. Speaking of submitting, get out of here. Speaking of submitting, as soon as you answer a question, hit enter or submit, it updates your grade. So you can come back, you can do part of it, you can skip around. As long as you've done it and got it, hit submit for that question, it's been entered. You don't have to enter or submit the entire assignment when you're done. It submits as you go. Let's look at another lesson. Okay, here we have the dot, so we can plot the different points. See if there's other features I wanted to talk about. Okay, it says give the coordinates. You will need to put it in parentheses. So x, y. Here you're matching. So you have a drop-down menu where you can pick the one that it matches to. Okay, here are use the intercepts of the graph to sketch this. Now I'm not actually going to calculate the intercepts specifically. In fact, why don't I do this one? You can see there's different tools, and some of them show up on the problem that aren't going to be used. Sometimes it's a smaller set of options. This one has more. So it says to sketch this one by using the intercepts. The y-intercept is -2. The slope is -1. So I'm not really using the intercepts. The other one I would have done is plot -2 if I was really doing the intercepts. Please note that you've graphed your line. I have students who submit it with more points because when you're doing this by hand, you're not as good as a computer, and so you often put more points. Please do not put more points. Just the 2 for the line itself, okay? Any more and you will be marked wrong. I have students who also then take this dot and start putting in. Don't add that in. That's just if you're specifically graphing points. Some of these have you graphing multiple things. So this one happens to be 3 lines. This is a line with a y-intercept of 0 and a slope of rise 1, run 3. Click down, so you've graphed the first one, y equals -1. That is a horizontal line like that. X equals 3, vertical line. You can go on the same point, but I recommend just going anywhere else. And there's your 3 points, your 3 lines. All right, that takes care of that. If you're ever in review mode, your scores are not saved. This is basically if you go back further in the course to an assignment that has already been done, you can keep practicing, but you won't get any more credit. And because I'm not in a course that's active, they're all going to say this, but because I'm not getting credit for any of this, I'm just showing you the orientation. It's all fine. The equation of a line. It says y equals out here, so please don't enter y equals again there. And it says you gave an equation on an expression because they just want the expression part because they have the y equals outside. There's a video and an ebook link. So when you hit video, it'll show you a video with different people, some with closed captioning, some without, some guys, some girls, even Spanish, with similar questions. It doesn't always match up perfectly, or it might kind of go for that lesson or that topic in general, but not for that specific question. Again, always feel free to message if you need help. And you don't have a show answer. That's just because I'm the teacher. I have a show answer option. Is there anything else in here? I think that's it for that. Okay, if you're graphing inequalities with two variables, you'll, instead of having an open dot and closed dot, you'll have a solid line or a dashed line for your boundary line, and then you'll need to shade. So if I was graphing this, I have the equal part, so it's going to be a solid line for the boundary line. Y-intercept is -1, the slope of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1. And then I need to figure out what side to shade. So I can just hover over and click anywhere on the side where it's the solution. And if I test 0, 0, is 0 less than 4 times 0 minus 1? So is 0 less than or equal to -1? 0 less than -1? No. So 0, 0 is not a solution. So I'd touch down anywhere on this side, anywhere. And now it's not toggling back. And you can hit, oops, not sure. Well, there's the answer, but I can hit submit and it would give me the credit for that. Okay, and it says score in gradebook because again, I'm just in the review mode. That's why it's saying 0. All right, next thing I want to look at briefly is this question. You are going to sometimes have the ability to have something that's not really snapping to a specific thing. So just, it is somewhat forgiving, but not completely. So like this wouldn't probably be acceptable for the intercepts. You really want it to be a little bit better. But you know, if you went a little bit lower, like, or higher than you really wanted, then you know, it is somewhat forgiving. All right, so get out of that one. Yes, leave. All right. For systems, let's go to one where it's, okay. So here it's greater than, so open dash line, -1, slope of 2, rise 2, run 1, rise 2, 1, run 1. You can see I'm slightly off here. It may not like that. Let me try to do it a little bit better. So -1. Again, it's fairly forgiving and it normally snaps. It's just when occasionally it doesn't. So testing 0, 0 is 0 greater than 0 minus 1. Is 0 greater than -1? Yes. So I do want this side shaded. And I can click down my test point or any point on that side. And then this one also is going to be a dashed because it's not equal to. Starting at 1. And then it has a slope of -1. So down 1 over 1. And just kind of check that the others line up with the same slope and that you didn't get slightly off just because you were approximating. And then test a point, 0, 0. So 0 less than 0 plus 1. Is 0 less than 1? Yes. So I want to include 0, 0 as a solution. So I'm going to shade this side. And so the solution to this system is this purple area, and you don't need to indicate that. It knows that it's looking for the overlap in the system. If you were doing this on a test on paper, for example, you'd want to darkly shade the region, or even potentially, you know, erase the part that is just part of the work. Oops. And I mentioned the video a moment ago. The ebook will take you to the corresponding section in the electronic version of the textbook so that you can look up examples of how to work with that concept. Oops. All right. So if you're working with something a little bit more advanced here, I'm going to, factor this. This is a difference of squares. We'll learn more about this as you go through your course. It's hard to use my mouse for that. And then I have a common factor of 5 here, a plus 6. The a plus 6 factors can cancel, so my answer will be a minus 6 over 5. So I would enter a minus 6 over 5, maybe, but that's not what I wanted. So either you need to edit it with your keyboard, or maybe if you're not as comfortable with that, I would really recommend the yellow arrow when doing the math quill, because then you can create your fraction and literally type in what you want in the numerator spot and watch your variables. I'll show you in just a moment. It says syntax okay. If you put a B in here, it says syntax error, check variables. You might be using the incorrect one. Sometimes it can kind of see that you're not using the right letter and let you know. And I've had students who submitted questions like this on a test, and it tells them that there's an error, and it even gives them hints about what to do, or at least that there's an error. So please do look at the preview. It doesn't mean it's correct, but it at least means that it understands what you're trying to say, and you can see if it matches what your intent was. So A cannot be. So again, sometimes stuff is on the left side. Don't repeat it. All right, and submit. And again, if you didn't get that question correct, you have 3 attempts at that, and then you can always hit try similar question and get a similar one and have 3 attempts at that and continue that process until you figure it out. And if you've tried it a couple times, please feel free to message, email me, message me through inbox in Canvas. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to discuss in this section. Yeah, so if you need to end up doing like a squared thing, if I wanted to do x squared, I'd hit x to the power of 2, or if I wanted to do y squared, this is just saying I'm going to have a power, and then here's for a subscript, which we don't use very often, and then you can do a square root, and all these other options. All right, so let's see. That was it for this. Oh, sometimes, let me clear this screen. If there's 2 answers, sometimes they have an answer box for each of the answers and they separate with a comma. Occasionally they don't, and if there are 2 answers, you can put a comma in between the 2. All right, I think that's it for that. All right. So here's another example of watch what is around your entry box. So it already has x equals, and then it'll be like 4 plus or minus 5i is how you'd read this. So there's the I is already there. I've had students put the I in here because they weren't paying attention to the fact that there was stuff outside of here, because on paper you don't normally have things already appearing on your paper. You have to write them down. So when you're dealing with a vertex or a parabola, you'll be using the parabola tool. And the parabola tool, the generic shape, tool is using this icon right here. But really what it's telling you is, just like with a line, you needed 2 points on the line. Here you need 2 points, but you need the vertex specifically and then any other point. And so I'm going to be graphing this parabola. I know it's a parabola because the highest exponent is 2. And I need to find the vertex. So actually I'm going to do one where I happen to be able to easily figure out the vertex. So this is a vertex at 0, -1. And you can find that either by thinking about it in vertex form or by calculating the vertex using the vertex formula. You'll learn more about that in the chapter 8 section. So then you need another point. So you can either think of this as, okay, that's the bottom of my parabola because it's opening upward. If I plug in 1, what would I get? Well, 1 squared is 1, -1 is 0. And so that's another point. And parabolas are symmetric about their vertex, so you can see the symmetry here. If I had a parabola where the vertex was here and the leading coefficient was like -2, I'd be going down to -2. I'd be going down because of negative, and 2 because the a is 2. And if you go over 2 spots, you'd be going down twice the normal. So instead of 2, 4, which is 2 squared, I'd be going over 2 down because it's negative, and then twice the 4, so down 8 spots. But the point is, you have to graph the vertex, so you might have to calculate the vertex and then some other point. And do not put in dots, even though that's here. You just want the 2, and that will make the shape you want. I think that's it for this section. All right, let's go to all right, let's do it from this format so I can see the problems a little quicker. Write the equation. Let's see, I want to do graphic. Okay, so let's do this one. So this is a circle. We're in the circle section of the course, and I know it because the x is squared, the y is squared, and there's a plus. And if I made this equal to 1 for a conic, I'd be dividing both by 12, and so it's the same distance in the x and y direction, so that makes it a circle. It is going to have a center at the opposite because it's in parentheses at opposite, so -2, 3. And a radius of the square root of 12, because this is your radius squared. You'll learn more about that in that section of the book. So the square root of 12, well, it's between 9 and 16, so it's between 3 and 4. And it turns out 3.464, so it's about 3.46. So I'm going to do some other point on the circle. So 1, 2, 3.46, somewhere right around there. And it's a little forgiving, so don't stress the exact position. And if you get it wrong, try again. And if it marks you, and when it shows you the answer after your third attempt, if it's really, really close, message me and I can see about overriding the score if it's just about you being slightly off. But more often than not, students make mistakes in the placement, not taking the opposite of both those, or doing 12 units instead of the square root of 12, or maybe doing half instead of square root or something. All right, and then I think that was it for this lesson in terms of features I wanted to share with you for entering. Sometimes the directions don't explicitly say the format, but when you click in here, it'll tell you to use to enter the interval using inequalities. So if you solve this and you actually accidentally did interval notation, it'll say invalid inequality notation. And I had a lot of students, well, not a lot, I had a couple students who didn't get credit for their answers because they put it in the wrong format, and it wasn't clear necessarily in the directions, but it is clear if you click there or if you look at the preview. So again, that's part of the importance of looking at the preview, is that it will indicate if something was done incorrectly in terms of assuming things. Let me see if there's something else. Give me a moment. This is asking for the domain and range, and again, it doesn't specify the format for it until you click in here and it says interval notation. Do recognize that interval notation, domain and range are not about intercepts. That is one of the main mistakes on this problem. The domain is the x's that you can plug in for your function. In other words, this function here, what x's have been graphed. Well, it has x values from -7 all the way to 7, all these places in between, -6.9, negative, 5.5, and 1.25 as an x, etc. So for close dots, to include it, bracket, -7, comma, the highest 7, and you can see that it's doing what I had asked, but if I had left this off, it'll say it's invalid. Or if I had done something like -7, because I didn't know what it was, it'll again say it's invalid. So hopefully some of the issues will be mitigated by you watching the preview. And range is going as low as -15 all the way to 15, not just the y-intercept. Again, that was a misunderstanding that some students had in the past. This question says, find the equation of a line that passes through these points. Write your answer in standard form. So it does specify the format. So make sure that you answer it in that format. Enter an algebraic equation. So you should have an equal sign. It doesn't have like the y equals out in front because standard form is ax plus by equals c. And so you would need to type it in that format. So if you started doing like y equals da, 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 it's going to tell you syntax error, check variables, all sorts of things. Even if I wrote an equation, and again, this is not for this one specifically, it's just a random answer I put in here. It says the syntax is okay, but it's not going to give you credit because, well, one, it's wrong, but even if it was right or equivalent, it's not standard form. So you would need to type it in standard form, whatever the answer is. Another thing that you have to be careful of is the plus minus. Just like I mentioned, like your cell phone or your computer, you might have a button for like a square root or a plus minus. Do not use those. It will not interpret them correctly. If you have an expression like this that you're trying to enter into the system, it's -3 plus √2, and then the second answer is -3 minus √2. So you'd answer them like this and this using the square root function either from here or by typing in sqrt for square root. If you don't want a square root, you want some other root, there is another option to do that root. And then you have to put in the, as you can see, it says undefined, you have to put in the index value and the radicand value. And so this is not behaving like I thought it did. Expression undefined. Two for the index. And oh, I remember now. It'll give you the directions when it's applicable, but it's another set. So this would be the square root of 32, or you could do cube root. You do the index and then the radicand part. But that is mentioned when you have roots of different index values in the directions. It'll tell you how to enter it, or in the orange boxes. You might see some orange boxes every once in a while. Where it gives you a tip for things. So do pay attention to that information, as well as the orange stuff in the answer entry box, as well as looking at the preview when you do problems. All right, I hope that helps.